House Transportation Committee 21 is now in session. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Representatives Boyd, Campbell, Grills, Halford, Hicks, Hurt, Kiesling, Marsh, McKenzie, Potts, Powers, Russell, Thompson, Todd, Towns, Weaver, Whitson, Vice Chairman Hall.
Here.
Chairman Howell.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Any personal orders from the committee? None? I'll let you know that we do not have a calendar of bills today. This is a presentation committee today. We will have several items on the calendar next week because Sub was busy in its last session. Today, the Department of Safety is with us for the purpose of giving us an update on the Real ID. I don't know if you have received a lot of questions from your constituents. I certainly have over the past several months, getting an update on the Real ID. And so we're going to hear the presentation and then have some time at the end for a Q&A. And hopefully this will help you answer the questions when you get them from your constituents. Presenting today, first of all, let me move around here so I can see her. Miss Elizabeth Stroker is with us from the Department of Safety, and she has a couple of folks with her, and I will let her introduce them. And Ms. Stroker, you are recognized.
Hi, committee. Elizabeth Stroker, Legislative Director and Assistant General Counsel with the Department of Safety. With me, I have Assistant Commissioner Paula Shaw. She is over our whole driver services program. And then also, y'all all know Michael Hogan behind us, who is our Director of Driver's License Issuance. And he's here for any questions that, he has the most knowledge. So he's here for any random questions that may come up. Just a little briefer of Real ID. As most of you know, but for any new members, Real ID was something that was created after, I guess it was 2010, 2007 is whenever that whole act started. And it is a requirement by the federal government that if you choose to fly domestically within the United States, or enter a federal building, enter a nuclear power plant, any of those federal infrastructures, that you have a credential that is Real ID compliant. It requires the same amount of vetting that we already do for driver services since we've been doing for the past 10 years, but we're finally in the phase that we're issuing the actual credential itself that has, that star on top of it that shows that it's the Real ID. And so obviously that was set to go back in place in October of 2020, but due to COVID, they delayed that 1 year. So now we have a little bit of extra time, and the Real ID will now be required for commercial domestic flights, entering a federal building, or entering a nuclear power plant starting October 1st of 2021. So with that, and also just a briefer, we have a website we've created for Real ID, and I can share that with the committee. It has all of the information, FAQs, anything that your constituents may want answered just in that really easy to use website. And so happy to share that as well. But I'll turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Shaw, and she'll kind of give you all the main points and all the great things. They've actually been able to do a lot over COVID, kind of with the slowdown of people coming into a center. So hopefully that'll help with the people coming in to get their Real ID before it starts here in October.
Good to see you. Welcome. You're recognized.
Let's see. Where's the button? The on off. Click that.
Now?
Yep.
Okay. We'll start over. Thank you, committee. Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Ms. Stroker, for giving that overview of what the Real ID actually is. Just keeping in mind, this is a federal initiative that has been passed down on the states. It's something that many states have struggled with implementation for a number of years. The state of Tennessee actually moved forward with issuance of the Real ID in 2019. And since that time, as you can imagine, it has been a very active endeavor for the Driver Services Division. I joined the division in late 2019 with the impending deadline of the Real ID at that time was October 1st of 2020. And when COVID actually become a reality, the federal government saw fit to extend the Real ID deadline to October 1, 2021. So during that period of time with COVID, we have been able to pursue a number of technology improvements and other improvements that we actually had underway anyway, but it expedited the process. I do have some prepared comments so that I don't forget to cover anything, and I'm going to refer to my notes if you don't mind, and then any questions that you may have after that, we'll be glad to answer. So as you all know, on March the 3rd, 2020, at approximately 2:30 a.m., the state of Tennessee was hit by several tornadoes that ripped through downtown Nashville and continued moving eastward through the state, leaving an extensive path of devastation, death, and destruction. At that time, the Driver Services Division activated its continuity of operations plan and developed it and deployed its mobile units to aid those affected. As our activities surrounding the tornado were starting to wind down, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. The call center and all central back office operations were rapidly transitioned to an alternative work schedule model where they work remotely and continually handled calls totaling 274,329 calls with an average wait time of 11 minutes and 8 seconds. The Driver Service Division has continued to operate throughout the pandemic, seeking new and innovative ways to deliver service, never ceasing operations. And while operations were modified in some instances and some services temporarily delayed, the division has continued to provide services to our customers in a healthy and safe environment with an average wait time of 19 minutes. We've had to overcome many challenges this past year and continue to do so with agility and persistence to provide the best customer service experience. Of our 46 Drivers Services Centers, 31 have had to temporarily close their offices to the public for employees to quarantine. 13 of these offices have had to close more than once, resulting in 50 incidents of closures across the state. As you might imagine, we have had to be very agile and transition quickly to continue to provide the services. Driver Services takes both our customers and our employees' health, safety very seriously. The Driver Services Centers have added protective screens at examiner counters, limited capacity inside the centers based on recommended CDC guidelines, provided protective gear for employees, followed employee guidelines set by the Tennessee Pledge, increased cleaning and sanitation for all Driver Services centers and equipment. We encourage the customers to wait in their vehicles using the department's queuing technology until notified by text or phone to enter the center if the capacity in the center has already been exceeded. And we've encouraged the use of credit or debit cards to minimize the handling of currency. As of January 31st of this year, we have upward of 5.8 million licenses in effect. Of these licenses, 3,024,987 were legacy licenses, 1,156,171 were Real ID credentials, and 1,683,091 were non-Real ID compliant credentials. I would remind you that Tennessee is an elective state on the Real ID. It's not mandatory that everyone obtain a Real ID. It's strictly elective. If you need it, then we make it available to you if you feel that that is an option that you require. But if not, you're not required to get it, and your legacy license is still good for all other purposes as far as your identification, driving privileges, and all other privileges. I think there was some confusion about that in the beginning. As a result of the impact of COVID-19, the federal government, Department of Homeland Security, extended the implementation deadline to obtain a Real ID to October 1st, 2021. As I stated, 1,156,171 Real ID licenses have been issued out of the overall total of 2,839,262 licenses that have been issued since July 1, 2019, when Tennessee begun issuing them. We are currently trending near 43% of all credentials being issued as those being Real ID. The Driver Services Division has made many improvements and has used this period of time as an opportunity to expand and improve the service delivery to our customers, including the opening of 2 new express centers, one in West Tennessee, known as the Bartlett Express, one in Middle Tennessee, known as Centennial Express. And we've added an additional 80 examiner positions statewide, thanks to the support of the legislature last year. We've added an additional 150 iPad kiosks statewide. We've upgraded the queuing system to include the texting and email notification features. We've introduced appointments for services for the scheduling, which has helped to regulate the flow of traffic and the wait time. We've introduced e-tickets for services, introduced a live online customer dashboard to show wait times at our centers with a GPS map to our website to help customers plan their visits, and added 3 county clerk partners for a total of 44 county partners with a total of 54 third-party locations. Some of our county partners have multiple locations in the county. For example, Knox County, I think, has 6. So we've had great success there. There's some type of service offered in nearly every county in the state, though they may not be a full service center. Driver Services has also continued to expand online services to provide our customers an option and the tools they need to conduct driver license business whenever and wherever they choose on any device. We've added 16 new services online. Our website and online services are secure and encrypted, and driver's license arrive within the same time frame as issuance in a driver services center. The online services are not only convenient, but have ensured the agility and the resilience of the department and service delivery in a socially distant manner. These changes have allowed us to continually offer needed services throughout the obstacles that we have faced this last year from remote locations. And I would point out that the pandemic, the tornado, the freeze, the bombing, all of the things that the state has experienced, we have been impacted directly by all of those things. And by implementing some of the online services and allowing our employees to work from remote locations, we have been able to continually deliver service throughout these circumstances. The online services that have been implemented in 1 year's time include new resident and new driver's license applications, driver's license and CDL renewals can be completed online. One of the things that really helped through the pandemic was the ability to allow the commercial vehicle industry to upload their med certifications online. The driver's license or CDL duplicates, and then reinstatement document uploads. This is particularly impactful for those individuals who may have had some prior history and they're trying to get their license reinstated. They can now upload those documents online and have those reviewed and vetted. In some cases, go ahead and continue the process of issuance and reinstatement. Reissue of the license after reinstatement. You can advance a graduated driver's license for teens, purchase a driver history. You can change your address. Submission of an owner-operator report can now be submitted online. You can take a practice driving test online. And we also have implemented the customer email and notification system. As you can imagine, with the center closures that we've experienced as a result of COVID, that is very important. With implementing an appointment system, you also need a very robust notification system. So we have implemented the notification system to go along with that email appointment scheduling system. So when we do have a closure, I would like to really drive this point home that we have a very firm, very established process. When we have notification that we have, for some reason, the center is going to have to be closed that day, that we can notify the customers usually within 20 minutes of the time that we know it. It goes out in a blast email to everyone. And then we have staff that it either tells them how they can go back online and reschedule, or we have staff that reach out to those individuals. We have a very robust process that we use. We've become quite experienced at it after we've had to do this 50 times. One of our most recent improvements that we've made, and we're really hopeful for, about is the ability to upload documents for pre-vetting before you actually visit a center. This is particularly important, and as you may be aware, those of you who are familiar with Real ID, sometimes you go to the center and maybe you don't have the correct documents. You thought you did, but when you get there, you find out in the review process that you don't. So after you visited the center and you've taken time out of your day, then you find out you got to come back again because one of the pieces of paper that you had is not the actual piece of paper that you need. So with the pre-vetting process, which as we moved forward with online services, this was our phase 3, which has recently been implemented. You can start your application online. You can upload your documents online, and then we have a back office team that's recently been created that can review those documents, communicate back to you and say, yes, no, you will need to obtain the actual copy of this document. You will need to obtain a document that is a signature on it because this one is not fully executed. So it will save time and saves time in that you don't have to make repeat trips to the center. And if we're not having to make repeat trips to the center, that cuts down the wait times for those individuals who really need to be there. There are certain services to be performed that you have to come to the center for. Our objective and our goal is to identify any type of transaction that can be completed online that doesn't require a trip to the center, that allow them to complete it online. So thereby it would reduce wait times for everyone else and allow us to administer skills tests and some of the other types of transactions that do require that you come into the center. Again, I mentioned the email notification for rescheduling the station appointments and the GPS map in the center locations with the current wait times. That helps if an individual is trying to decide which center to go to. They can look, they can tell how busy that center is, they can schedule an appointment, they can apply for an e-ticket, or if they're at one location and want to go to another, they can look and see if there's another one that's close by. So we are moving forward with every type of opportunity that we can think of to make it more convenient for the customer. We sat around as a team in the beginning. We said, okay, this is a challenging situation. So how can we make this an opportunity to make things better for the public and for the workforce? And we've had great success with that so far. Through this process, we built a lot of resiliency within our division and our partnerships with locations across the state, as well as offering online and kiosk services. And I would say thank you again for allowing us to provide you with this information. And we would please encourage your constituents to attempt to use before they visit a center. A lot of people are not aware of all of the online services that are now available. Though they manage to find it rather quickly, we can put something up for a quick test and we'll have 300 over the weekend that come in. So they're looking for it, and we feel like we're providing the services that they're asking for, and we will continue to move in that direction. And thank you so much, and we're open for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Shaw. Very concise and very informative, and I'm sure we do have some questions from committee members. Chair Lady Weaver, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you both ladies. Thank you. You're always so accessible. You've helped many of my constituents that have called and said, I'm out here in Gallatin and it's been 5 or 6 hours and I still haven't got in line close to get my driver's license ID thingamabob. So thanks. And Ms. Shaw, I wasn't even aware of all of this newfangled online stuff. Is there like a tutorial where you can teach me how to use it? Is there something that's available to us where, or I guess just get an appointment with you and have you come, and I'm all visual. So if I can actually see it happening and how to do this, especially I'm interested in be able to practice driving test online. My grandson's getting ready to get his permit. So I'd like to kind of see what this is about. When I go to my schools, it'd be kind of cool to let people know this. So I guess, do you have like a one-sheeter that tells us everything that you've done here since all the last year basically is when you put this in place? Am I correct?
That's correct. We have been working to update the website as rapidly as possible and get communications out, but any material, those are developed and help you with that. I would like to share that one of the things, in addition to the knowledge test online, just the practice test, we are working toward making that available online, as far as which we would hope, and I'm gonna look over my shoulder at Director Hogan, with all that we hope for, we hope to have that knowledge test online, so that the knowledge test portion of it, that not only would you be able to take your practice test, you would be able to take your knowledge test online as well. So we do anticipate that to be available within the next year.
And thus you would, excuse me. And
Correct.
thus you, in other words, do as much as you can online so that the lines are not long at the centers.
Exactly, cuts down wait times, and like I said, I know with one of our Real ID, or one of our online services, the reinstatement documents, we brought it up in phases. So MedCerts were first because we realized the urgency of keeping the supply chain going during the pandemic. So that's something that is a challenge for the commercial vehicle industry. So we wanted to be sure to bring that up first. They found, without us even having to promote it, the industry found that capability online. The reinstatement documents were the second thing that we moved forward with. And literally over the weekend, I'm looking at Director Hogan, but I believe it was a couple hundred, 200 or 300 that came in without any advertising. So the people are looking for these online services.
One more question.
You're recognized.
And then one more piece. Have we been able to hire the needed employees at some of these centers? Because I understand it was just hard to find, not only find, but then when you find them and train them, then you lose them. And so how are we on that right now in terms of manning these centers?
It is a challenge for us. Our entry-level salary for an examiner is about $14.45 an hour. And what that does is puts us in a position where we're competing with fast food, big box stores. This position, an examiner position is much more sophisticated than people realize. The requirements, when if you think about it, you're reviewing credentials and documents, trying to authenticate. You're putting your personal safety in jeopardy getting in the car with individuals to determine whether they can drive or not. So
Joe, you wouldn't do that.
and they have been determined to be critical and essential employees during the pandemic. That's always kind of been a question, but during the pandemic, it was realized how important it was to have these individuals on the front line every day, which is why they have been there, and they have been, I can't use the word trooper because that would step on somebody else's toes, but they have been very dedicated, and they are there with the customers face to face every day. And there's an endless line of people that they're exposed to. The position, as you can imagine, sometimes it does become a little less than pleasant. We do have incidences where there are automobile, they may be involved in an automobile crash. There may be hostility that's directed toward our workforce. So when you look at over here for $14.45 an hour or over here for $14.45 an hour, it makes it very difficult to recruit those individuals and or retain them if we do. They are also, for issuance of real ID, they're subject to background checks. And unfortunately, there's a number of individuals who would be interested in the position that may not qualify based on that fact. So to answer your question, that's a long way to answer your question, but it is very challenging. The positions that we have, we do carry a high vacancy rate. We do have turnover quite frequently, and it does take the training that's involved to become proficient with this. It takes an extensive period of time. This is not something that you can learn. You can't learn about birth certificates and passports and all the different types of things, the court documents, the med search. Can't learn about all of that fast enough to get out there. And quite frankly, there's just easier jobs to do for the same amount of money.
Not
And
so exciting, though. Not
Yeah,
as exciting.
that's true. That's true. This is very exciting.
How many facilities, centers do we have throughout the state, driver's license?
46.
46?
We have 46 state centers,
Okay.
state-run centers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to brag on Commissioner Paula Shaw for helping us try to get a new driver's center in Bedford County. She's been invaluable help, and we're in process of doing that right now. And another thing I want to say is I'm trying to help a young citizen of Bedford County get his license. Since our center was closed, we went online and made an appointment in Lincoln County in Fayetteville. It was easy, filled out all the paperwork, got down there on his appointment time, and we were right on time, and they took us on time, and he took his test, and we were out there in about 30 minutes. And I couldn't believe, it was very crowded, and the people were super responsive and super friendly, which I was shocked. So something good is happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would point out that we do still take walk-ins. I know that was a concern from some people. Is everything going to be required as appointment? We do give priority to the appointment, but we do still accept walk-ins. That's been a learning curve for everyone to manage, but
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
It was good.
Thank you as well. And Commissioners, thank you as well. I didn't know all this good stuff was going on over there. Y'all been hiding that stuff over there, all this good stuff happening in the department since.
we just put our
Pandemic.
head down and work.
So the pandemic is what made all this happen, right? 50
Well,
shutdowns and all that good stuff.
it helped us.
Uh-huh.
The planning was underway for quite some time. I'm going to say with the remote work opportunities, as you can imagine with retention, if
Mhm.
an individual doesn't have the commute cost to come in, the ability to work from home and not have that cost that is something that's an advantage. That's something that allows individuals to look at this employment opportunity over something else. But yes, we have been busy, but there has been planning going on for quite some time, and we were able to move forward more quickly.
Well, we're excited about it. Glad to hear you give us that testimony. A few questions for you, if you don't mind, please. First thing is that the Real ID, you were saying that you're encouraging people to credit card, debit card, but you're not denying cash acceptance, are you?
No, sir.
Okay, so we can still bring cash.
That's correct.
in, okay, which is good. And other thing is this, is that you say the state is an elective as a part of participating with the Real ID. What does that actually mean when we say elective?
When we say elective, the only reason that you are required to have, you would be required to have a Real ID. There are 3 provisions set out in the Real ID Act. One is to fly domestically. The other is entering a nuclear facility. And the third thing would be entering certain federal buildings. And it does require that you have a Real ID compliant credential. So the Real ID document license itself is not the only credential. There are other types of credentials that would qualify as well. A passport, for example.
Right.
A passport is going to allow you to fly domestically and commercially, and internationally. So when it was originally implemented by the federal government, the gist was that it gave the impression that everybody had to have it, and there were all these other reasons for it. So there was some confusion about it for quite some time.
Okay,
And-
thank you for that as well. Now, just a couple of things more, and I'll be done. I love the ability to text and email people and notify people with the technology. Okay, and that has been expanded where you can notify me or whomever that the place is closing, and you have the ability to blast out to how many thousands of millions at one time.
It's the only people we can notify are the ones that have scheduled an appointment.
Got it.
We
Got it.
don't have a database
Got it.
of emails. If
Got
you
it.
schedule with us,
Got
you've
it.
used an
Got it.
email to set up, so we blast back out to that group.
Got it. 2 other things. Thought about doing all this good stuff you're doing now. PSA announcements. People really need to know this. Now, we can get around individually, talk to small groups, but all this good stuff needs to be acknowledged across the state. And I think some PSA announcements on this stuff will probably encourage people to, take advantage of what it is that we've done within this last year that I didn't know about.
I think that's a great recommendation, and we do constantly do press releases and publications, but as you're stating, you can't get it out there too much. Cannot. And then anyone that's in leadership, when we speak at a group, and we're always available to speak to any group or body that you have, we try to share that message as well. But we have even partnered with some of the news stations and shared some information, but it's constantly changing. This
Right.
last year has been a constantly evolving thing, but yes, we'd
Well,
welcome
we're
that
your advocates.
opportunity.
We're your advocates as well, and we want to help, but I think you'd be able to touch the population in a broader way by taking advantage of the airwaves.
Yes, sir.
And the 16 new services online, could you just tell me a couple of 3 or 4 of those? What are those? You said you had 16 new online services.
The 16 of the ones that come to mind right off the top of the head, because off my head, are the med certs,
Okay.
the upload of the med cert for the commercial vehicle industry. Part of that licensing requirement is that they maintain the medical certification to ensure that they're safe to and healthy to operate upon the roadways. And as you can imagine, those individuals may be working and be in California picking up a load when this certification needs to be uploaded, rather than them trying to have to get to a center or
Right.
mail it and wait for it to be posted.
Right.
This can now be uploaded online, and they receive a notification back that
Good.
it's received, and then they receive a notification when it is processed electronic. So they have that for their files. Let's just say they're out on the road. The other one that comes to mind is the reinstatement document that I
Right.
mentioned. When an individual has experienced, I'm going to say, some hardships and some bad luck, they may be operating or may have had a suspended or revoked license, and there's a process they have to go through in order to be able to resolve those issues and to get back in an active state of driving. There are a number of documents that they need to provide, proofs of insurance, proofs of adjudication and payment. So those documents can now be uploaded online, and that process, it takes a lot of people out of the centers. Just having the map online that shows where all the centers are,
Okay.
where all of our third-party partners are, what types of services they have, and even the drive time with the GPS map. If you're setting it in Nashville and you're thinking, wait, I live in whatever,
Right.
I wonder how long the wait time is there. If I got time to drive, you can
Right.
actually sit there and look and see what it is, your drive time,
Right.
how many people are waiting. Of course, it's going to change
Yeah.
based on what happens in that period of time. You can reserve an e-ticket, put yourself in line,
Right.
or even check for an appointment.
Well, high kudos to you and your team, Commissioner. Appreciate
I
it.
have a great team.
Okay, yes, you do. Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Thompson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the information. As a new member of this committee, this has been very informative to me. Just a couple of quick ones. The Express Centers, what do they do that that regular driver's license centers don't do?
The Express Center, and I know it confused me at first. Basically, the Express Center does not do the skills testing portion. It takes more staff at a center that also delivers the testing and the skills testing. You have additional staff at those locations. So the Express Center is going to do more of your renewals and your standard transactions that do not require the testing portion or the reinstatement portion. The reinstatement portion, as you can imagine, if a person does need to come to the center, is much more complex than a renewal of a license and getting your picture taken.
Okay, and how many do you have in the state?
Express Centers? Three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of real IDs, do you expect a glut of people coming to get them as we approach October the 1st?
I think that it would be realistic to expect near the deadline that we would likely see an influx, because there are early adopters and then there are individuals who are not early adopters. So I think it would be realistic to see an increase in foot traffic near the time of that deadline.
Okay, and possibly a big reduction of people past that October 1st, or is that even predictable?
It's not predictable since we are an elective state. Since some states chose to implement Real ID as mandatory for every person. Tennessee did not elect to go that route because not every person needs that Real ID. So we've left it strictly to the citizens. So it's hard to predict.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the
Thank you.
information.
Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I echo sentiments there that being a new member to this committee and a new member to this body, this was a great opening orientation for me. Couple of questions, and you said it differently, I think, the last time than the previous two. You said that you said nuclear power plants, but it's really nuclear facilities, right?
It's nuclear facilities, you're correct, because I think of Oak Ridge, I think
Right.
of TVA, and that's where we've got the greatest interest, where we'd have an employer that it's like we have a big drive for this. We have to get this done. So
And that's right, because it said the guy that works at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and then you all actually provided a bus that came to help get some of the employees. But it's, but that's the there's a lot of federal facilities like Oak Ridge and TVA, and then that kind of brought me to my to my question, and that's if someone's has an appointment at the Social Security office, where they have to go up to an office in the upper floors, not at the lobby. Does that person have to have a Real ID to enter that federal facility?
I think that's the tricky part of this. The DHS, the way the regulation's written, it says certain federal buildings. That we've asked that question multiple times, what constitutes certain federal buildings? I think the intent was something more in line with maybe the federal courthouse, the Pentagon, something of that nature. But the definition is we constantly look to DHS for that defining guideline.
Okay. And I guess that's probably going to come after October 1, which leads me to my last question, and that, I know when they delayed it for a year, that made a lot of sense, but the thinking at the time is we would probably be further along away from this COVID environment. Do you think the federal entities are going to kick the can down the road further? Or I know it's a gut kind of a thing for you, or do you think this is going to be a line in the sand and they won't push it past October?
We are proceeding as if October 1, 2021 is the hard deadline. They have given no indication that it will be extended beyond that, though they usually don't. But we are proceeding, and we are monitoring and implementing things that will help us meet that timeline. As I stated earlier, we're currently tracking of on a monthly basis of about 43% of all credentials that we issue during that month are real ID. So we're trending in a good direction.
Thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
All right, I see no one else on the list. We do have Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies, thank you for coming up. Just probably want to go in just a little bit of a different direction, but the agreement we have with the Department of Homeland Security, how can that be changed or altered, and how much notice would the Department of Homeland Security have to give in order to do that?
Yeah, I think I'll take this one. We can't. Is kind of the short answer. It's not necessarily an agreement we have with them. It is a federal regulation law that was passed. And so we had a few options whenever that was passed. We could either comply with it in one of two ways. We could offer it as an elective document to where you could get it if you wanted to, or just use your passport, or if you're someone who's not going to be flying or entering a federal facility, then you just keep your Tennessee specific license, your legacy license. Or we could mandate it like some states have done, and we chose not to do that. Or we could not offer it altogether. And obviously we decided that would be at a detriment to Tennesseans, because then they would be required to get a passport if they wanted to comply with that federal requirement. So there's not a way that we can necessarily opt out of it, because we do believe that would kind of be at the detriment of Tennesseans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And along those lines, the state database, which stores all the information, do the feds ever have access to that, or is that completely secluded from them?
And we get this question a lot too, so I'm glad you asked that actually. The federal government does not have blanket access to our internal records for drivers. Obviously, there are specific exemptions to that, if it's a law enforcement request or something along those lines, but no, the information is kept in state and it cannot just be accessed at will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, are there any questions that have to do with the individual's health or their vaccination records that go into the Real ID?
No, sir. I will state though, there are obviously health questions for CDL holders in relation to them being able to drive, but that's completely separate. It's more of, are you able to drive this type of vehicle?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Shaw and Elizabeth and Director Hogan, I just want to appreciate y'all coming out here today. It's been very informative. If y'all have a chance just to relay to our driver's license employees, we thank them for the hard work they do.
Thank you so much for recognizing them. It has been a very stressful time for them, as you might imagine. I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
Representative Towns, you're recognized.
Mr. Chairman, once again, thank you. One question, and hopefully you can just spell this out briefly for me. What is the difference between the Real ID and the regular legacy ID? What's the difference that the federal government has denoted? I mean,
Establishing legal presence was one of the items, and the verification of a Social Security number, which there's been some recent changes. The Real ID Modernization Act passed in December of 2020, which is going to change some of the verification processes we have on the Social Security number, but the legal presence was the largest factor.
So if you have, so in other words, you're saying your social security number is attached to it as well?
The three things that you need to have in order to obtain a real ID
Okay.
is established legal presence and identity, proof of social security number, and the 2 verifications for residence. So
Okay.
while we had some of the requirements in state law before, we did not have them to the same level of real ID standards. And for those of you who may not understand the reason the real ID became an issue, this was an act of the 9/11, post 9/11 commission, because they realized that a lot of individuals used driver's license or some other type of breeder document to authenticate their established what they needed in order to obtain the credentials and be able to fly. So that's why all of this, that's what all of this links back to.
And I will add, just because your main question there of what the difference is, for the most part, there really is not a difference for the legacy and the real ID. We have been real ID compliant for about 10 years, I believe. About 10 years, we've been what is considered real ID compliant without actually issuing the credential itself. And so for the most part, the verification is the same. The only difference, as Paula mentioned, is doing a little bit more with the social security number itself and not allowing for what is considered like a waiver of I was never issued one. But for the most part, it is identical documentation.
Okay, now, years ago, when I was a youngster, your social security number used to be put on your ID, on your driver's license. I know we don't do that anymore, nor
And
should we.
that's gone, that's
Yeah,
gone
no,
through
very
much
dangerous.
discussion.
Right.
Yes.
So there's no way someone can access your,
And it's,
Social
the
Security
only
number.
way it's on there now is if you elect for it to be on there,
okay.
which
Okay,
most people do not.
of course
It's
not.
not on mine.
No, it's not wise. Not, I mean, with the real ID, there's no
Yes.
way someone can backdoor and figure out what your social security number, because if they do, they can mess you up,
Right.
totally mess you up.
No.
Okay, very good. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again.
Thank you. Before we wrap things up, just a personal preference here for clarification. The legacy license there was confusion about this early on, but the legacy license can still be used for many, many things. If you're going to a business and want to write a check and then you can show them your legacy license, you can use it. If you want to use that as an ID to vote in Tennessee, you can still do that as well. So there are many, many things that if you do not plan to get on an airplane or go into a nuclear facility, you can still use your legacy
That is correct.
driver's license.
Yeah, there was a lot of confusion about that in the beginning. That seems to have calmed down quite a bit. I think a lot of retailers had a misunderstanding about the real ID and what it actually was.
Mhm.
So that's
And one
correct.
other thing, if I may, the documents that are needed to get the real ID are listed on the website.
That's correct.
Now, I understand there's a separate list for CDL, is that correct?
Yes,
And that's listed also
that's correct.
on the website, okay. I'm really encouraged to hear about the technology advances that you're using to streamline the process. On a personal note, I wish we could get that technology into the rural parts of Tennessee, because we still have many, many areas in my district and all across the state where internet is just not available. So in those areas where it's not available and they can't go online unless they drive to McDonald's or wherever in town, what have you done to try to accommodate those folks?
As we can move more individuals online, that makes more capacity to serve those particular individuals in the centers.
I appreciate that, and let me say I also appreciate the governor's initiative that he announced in his State of the State to make a strong effort to expand broadband all across the state of Tennessee. Any
If I
other
could-
questions from committee?
Okay.
Commissioner Shaw, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I do want to add, and I was short on the answer in response to you, but we have initiated private relationships with our county clerks, some municipal governments, and we
Yes.
have kiosks across the state as well. So those things are available to help serve the individuals in the rural counties. Many of our rural counties are partners with us.
Yes, I think one of my counties is.
And they
as
have
well,
the
and it's
ability to
working.
issue real ID.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you being here. I think the committee's learned a lot from your presentation. Thanks to Director Hogan, and thank you, Ms. Stroker, for coming. And without any other questions, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Uh,
you
bef-
all.
Before we adjourn, members, let me tell you, we are searching for another date when we can have that behind-the-scenes tour of the Nashville International Airport. The storm kind of messed that up, and a lot of people couldn't make it, couldn't come, so we canceled that date due to the storm, but we are looking for another date, maybe when it's a little warmer, but we still plan to do that. And if you haven't taken that tour, you will learn a lot and you will enjoy it. So do I hear a motion to adjourn? We are adjourned.